Welcome to lesson 3, where we're going to be talking about summarizing and paraphrasing without using plagiarism. So we have learned how to identify what credible sources are and avoid the bias. So now we're taking the next step, and we need to learn how to use these sources responsibly. So when we write about research, we often borrow other people's ideas, and that's fine, as long as we're doing it ethically. And that means that we need to summarize and paraphrase instead of just copying. We want to give proper credit to the author. So I'm going to teach you how to summarize or condense the main ideas. I'm going to teach you how to paraphrase, which is restating ideas in your own words, and how to avoid plagiarism. This is one of the most serious academic mistakes that a writer can make. The goal is not to just change a few words. It's to understand what the author means and then explain it accurately in your own voice. So by the end of this lesson, you're going to be able to tell when to quote directly and when to paraphrase closely and when to summarize broadly. You're going to learn how to take complex information and rephrase it without losing the meaning. And that proves real comprehension. We're also going to discuss how to cite your sources properly so that you can give credit to the original authors. Remember, ethical research isn't just about borrowing words, it's about building on ideas responsibly. So writers have 3 main tools when we're using research. We can quote, we can paraphrase, or we can summarize. A quote is going to use the author's exact words with the quotation marks. And you use that when the wording is powerful or precise. A paraphrase is going to restate the same idea, but in your own phrasing and structure. So it's about the same length as the original, but it shows that you understand it. And a summary condenses a large section into a few key points, and that's going to capture the essence without any of the details. So knowing when to use each is going to be the foundation of strong ethical research writing. So for a quote, we want to put it in exact quotation marks. It was a pleasure to burn. That's the exact words that the author used. When we're paraphrasing, we might say something like, Bradbury opens the novel by describing the fireman's disturbing joy in burning books. We're restating the idea. But for summarizing, we're taking out the details. So Bradbury's novel warns about the dangers of censorship. So let's talk about what plagiarism really means here. It's more than just copying and pasting. Plagiarism happens anytime that you're using somebody else's words or ideas or their structure without giving them any credit. And that's going to include patch writing. Patch writing is just changing a few words but keeping the same sentence order. Even if you didn't really mean to cheat, it's still plagiarism. And so schools and colleges are going to take this very seriously because it violates academic honesty. So the best way to avoid it is to just take careful notes, use quotation marks when needed, and always cite your sources. Good researchers are going to build on other people's work transparently, not secretly. And paraphrasing is an active process, not just a word swap. First, we want to read the passage carefully until we understand it, and then this part is going to be the key. We need to look away from the text. We need to write down what we remember in our own words. And that's going to force your brain to translate, not just copy. And when you're done, you want to compare it to the original so that you can make sure that you've kept the same meaning without borrowing the same language or sentence structure. And then always cite where the idea came from. Even if every word is yours, the idea isn't. So we need to credit your source, and that's going to keep your integrity intact. So here's a real example. Students who sleep less than 7 hours per night often struggle with attention, memory, and emotional regulation, especially when combined with high screen use before bed. So a poor paraphrase would say students who get under 7 hours of sleep at night often have problems focusing and remembering things when they use screens before sleeping. An effective paraphrase would say, according to health researchers, we want to give the credit, a lack of sufficient sleep, particularly for students who use devices late at night, negatively affects focus, memory, and emotional balance. And then we put Harvard Health 2024. All right. So the first paraphrase, this is just a copy and swap. Some of the words are changed, but the sentence structure and the phrasing are almost identical. That's still plagiarism. The effective paraphrase recognizes the idea, but it changes the structure and it attributes credit to the source. It doesn't mimic the rhythm or word order of the original, but it does convey the same meaning clearly. We have to remember that effective paraphrasing isn't just about comprehension. It's not just about shortcuts. You should sound like you're teaching the reader what you learned. And summarizing is like zooming out. You see the big picture without getting lost in the details. When summarizing, we first want to highlight what's essential. What is the main idea or the major supporting points? Then we want to cross out the minor details or examples. We don't want to add those in when we're summarizing. We just want to rewrite what's left in our own words and create this concise version that captures just what's the gist. And even though a summary uses fewer words, it still represents someone else's ideas too. So you have to cite the source. Summaries are going to show comprehension and synthesis. And these are skills that are going to help you on every research project. So here's some common mistakes students make when they paraphrase. First, they only change a few words, like swapping happy for glad. That's not enough. And second, they keep the same sentence rhythm, which makes it recognizable as the original. And then third, they forget to cite the source. Even if they did rewrite it, it still belongs to someone else. And then finally, some students just change so much that they lose the meaning. So the best paraphrases stay faithful to the idea while changing the language. So let's practice here. Overuse of social media can lead to distraction, anxiety, and reduced face-to-face communication, particularly among teenagers who are still developing social skills. So, what's the essential idea here? Social media overuse causes emotional and social issues, especially for teens. Now, we paraphrase that in our own voice. We want to say the same thing differently and then create a one-sentence summary that focuses on the overall message. And remember to check, did I copy any wording? Did I credit the source? And does my version sound like me? So go ahead and do that on your own sheet of paper. All right, so anytime that you're including information that is not your own, even if you reword it, you have to cite it. In MLA format, the citation goes in parentheses at the end of the sentence, but it's before the period. If there's no author, we want to use the organization or the website name. And then at the end of your paper, you want to list all your sources alphabetically on a works cited page. Because proper citation is showing respect for the intellectual property, and it's going to keep your writing transparent and also credible. So let's test your instincts here. When an author's words are powerful or memorable, quote them exactly. When you're restating a single idea from a few sentences, just paraphrase it. And when you're giving an overview of a long section or of an entire article, summarize it. Choosing the right method is going to help keep your writing balanced, and it's going to avoid plagiarism. So I want you to decide whether to quote, paraphrase, or summarize each statement. The author's sentence is famous or perfectly phrased. You need to explain one section in your own words, and you're capturing the main idea of an entire article. I want you to write those answers down on your sheet of paper. So before we close, I want you to reflect on what you've learned. Summarizing and paraphrasing are not just writing techniques. They're skills that demonstrate your integrity and your understanding. You now have the tools to transform research into your own authentic voice while honoring the work of others. So in our next lesson, we're going to build on this by learning to synthesize multiple sources into one coherent evidence-based idea.